I think both Iran and Russia are probably tied for being the two biggest threats to America for very different reasons. Um, Russia is trying to infiltrate our democracy. They are trying to reestablish themselves as a major world power, as a counterbalance on the global stage to us. And they have a track record they continue to prove year after year of not being moral with the way that they are guided. And they are simply in it to try to dominate the world again. They are trying to create hegemonic power for themselves, and we do not want to end up in another Cold War. I think Iran is, in a different way, an enormous threat because they're a big destabilizing force on the planet as a whole. You have a country that is a state sponsor of terror, that was trying to develop nuclear weapons and may now again be trying to do so because Trump just yanked us out of the best deal we could get. And they are constantly funding and supporting people that are attacking Israel, our greatest ally and the only democracy in the Middle East. And so that's another enormous problem. But China also is a third issue because they're growing so fast, and we have to live in a world, it seems, that America is no longer going to be, we've already accepted this, the sole superpower of the planet. We have to live in harmony with these other great powers, but we have to make sure that we are always, whenever possible, on the right side of history and the right moral side of these issues, so the rest of the globe supports our initiatives and does not support the people that are trying to take our place. It's very important, I think, that the United States persists as the moral leader of the world. I think we have shown since our founding that we are always so self-critical, even of ourselves, when we are so critical of ourselves, even when we stumble and are trying to constantly improve. And I think we have a very strong democracy, hopefully one that realizes we have to kick out Trump and is able to do so. That'll be an interesting test coming up. But we do set the moral tone for the world. But I do think that we do not have the money to continue to be the police of the world. And we have to realize we are going to be living in a world where it is led now by other superpowers as well. We have to live in harmony together, and we have to also double down on our multinational organizations. Obviously, it's a very difficult part of the world, and Afghanistan has gotten many a nation mired throughout history in their terrain and stuck there for far too long. Um, we have a moral obligation to lead the planet in how we should move and to try to get multinational organizations and coalitions together to fight the greatest evils we face. But I do not believe that we need to fight each of those battles ourselves. We've created so many enemies by being at war with this nation for so long. The Taliban is practically as strong as they were, and we're still trying to negotiate with them. And just this week, we have our peace envoy going to China to try to help us to make peace there in Afghanistan and make a deal with the Taliban, the same thing we've been trying to do for a very, very long time. And I think it's okay to step out of there and say, as long as we get an agreement and an assurance that we are not going to be the subject of their ire, and if that ever steps up, we step right back up with great force. We do not need to be there holding their hands forever because it's a futile endeavor. The US definitely spends too much on its military. Um, we need to have and always will have, by an order of magnitude, the most powerful military on earth. But we can still have that with very significant cuts to our budget because, as you, I'm sure, know, have a military the size of the next five nations combined is how strong and powerful and large our military is. And we do not need to dominate to that degree when we already have thousands of nuclear weapons and the most powerful, innovative, effective weapons on planet Earth. And so with a $700 or $800 billion a year budget, it's an insane level that we do not need to maintain and can't afford to maintain. So I would not make the cuts to troops. It would keep our troop levels, There is a lot of money that goes into these no bid contracts. We would get rid of no bid contracts. We would make sure that we get rid of constantly every year re-upping with new weaponry and new planes. Planes last more than a year. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they're pretty resilient. And so you can reduce your levels of spending on equipment, on weaponry, and also there's a 200 billion, I'm sorry, there's a $200 billion a year discretionary emergency fund that currently is supposed to be for, in theory, for any emergency in the country, but it goes to the military every year and they spend it every year. And instead I would make that go to the biggest emergencies in the country and not be a military based fund as it has been used in recent years. There have already been many studies that show there are at least right off the bat over 200 billion or around $200 billion of cuts that do not affect our readiness or our troop levels at all. We would identify more than that. And that amount of money could fund so many of our pressing issues. It could fully fund the VA. It could tackle so many other problems here at home. We could finally help Puerto Rico become whole again after Hurricane Maria, which seems to not be an issue to the current administration. We could finally tackle a lot of the problems we could here in our homeland that have not been prioritized by this administration. And we cannot afford to keep spending that much on the military, and we do not need to. I would tell all of our potential adversaries also that they should never, ever see that as any sort of weakness, because when we get leaner and meaner, we would be a much scarier person to ever, and a much scarier nation to ever try to approach in any sort of adversarial way. When you're unpredictable, you're a lot scarier. I think that Congress should not have given that authorization to the executive branch. Um, it's ingrained in our Constitution that it is supposed to be a check on executive power and that war is supposed to be declared by Congress. And so I think we have to give that power back to Congress. When there's an immediate threat, the president has to have leeway, but that needs to be for immediate response. And for a longer term war, it has to be approved by Congress, and that's what we should go back to. They should be punished. They should be punished drastically for it. Um, it is insane and a perfect example in one little microcosm right there of how morally bankrupt our current president is. I know we've had a long-standing ally relationship with Saudi Arabia, but 17 of the 18 attackers from 9/11, I believe that's the number, were Saudi Arabian. And now they literally brutally murder, and carve up a journalist who lived in our nation and worked to report truth in our nation. And that is something we cannot stand by. And so the way that they should be punished is in us stepping back from our relationship with them and not severing ties, but certainly not having as warm or friendly relationship with them, and telling them directly to their face, if you ever touch another American again, our relationship is over. Look, it's another tough situation, but we cannot fight every war. And we should not be getting involved in a regional conflict aside from the way that it does affect our interests. And I think certainly we should be on the side of Saudi Arabia there over Iran, but it's not our fight to fight. And it's not something that I'm comfortable committing American resources to when it's something that they are handling in that part of the world and does not affect currently our direct security interests. And so it's something that we have to work to stop Iranian influence, but we cannot involve ourselves. We certainly cannot put boots on the ground. We need to take care of things here at home. If I don't win, I'm not going to accept those results. I will be in the White House in January of 2021. I'm kidding. That's something Trump would say, though. Trump would probably say that.